So, there's a lot of things I've been wanting to talk about Hong Kong. However, I didn't know how to categorize them. So, I went looking for a Hong Kong iceberg chart, which is basically something where all the well-known stuff are at the top, things that most people would know are in the middle, and then the more bleak and depressing stuff is in the bottom. So, I looked and lo and behold, I found it. Now, this iceberg chart I found is very helpful because when you click on all of the titles on the website I found, it takes you to a link that explains what that is. So, it's a lot easier to research. However, a lot of these do not have any links to them when you click on them. And even some, when you click on them, it takes you to something, but it's completely normal. Yes, I will be explaining the things that seem completely normal, but with the completely normal things, I might have a hard time keeping it interesting. Warning before we start the video, however, a lot of these are gonna get pretty bleak, depressing, and disturbing. It's an iceberg chart after all, so viewer discretion is advised for the bottom layers. Li Ka-shang Typhoon Wall Theory. Now, this is a bit of a funny conspiracy theory in Hong Kong, but it's basically about how tropical storms seem to always avoid Hong Kong whenever they hit. Or if not, they just brush right by. So there's been, of course, a lot of conspiracy theories about this. However, the explanation is pretty simple. It's mostly just ocean temperature differences. Apple Daily Art. So, Apple Daily was a newsletter that used to run in Hong Kong. However, it was shut down after the national security law was passed. In fact, it was shut down within days. This entry is referring to the art that appeared in the newspapers. However, they aren't that really notable. Some of them are weird, yeah, and they don't look that good, but they're not that different from a lot of other pieces of art I've seen in newspapers. Penny's Bay Quarantine Center. So, in Penny's Bay, right next to Disneyland in fact, there's a giant quarantine center. I don't know how much it gets used anymore considering quarantine in Hong Kong is basically ended, but it'll probably get demolished and handed back to Disney pretty soon. Ghost Festival. Ghost Festival is something that happens on the 17th month of the Lunar New Year, and is a celebration to celebrate people's ancestors. In fact, one thing people do is take paper things of something they want their ancestors to have in the afterlife and burn it, so that its ashes go up to the afterlife. I don't celebrate this myself, so if I get some stuff wrong, don't blame me. Lau Ma Chai. Lau Ma Chai was a Hong Kong YouTuber that got imprisoned a while ago for some stuff I don't want to talk about because this would get demonetized on YouTube. Let's move on. Wan Chai Post Office. Now, this should probably go a bit lower on the list because it was actually hard to find research about this, but basically it's a story about how people in the 50s in Hong Kong would get delivered letters with blank pieces of paper in them. Then, the addressee would die in about 3 months after receiving the letter. I originally thought this was some sort of conspiracy theory, but no, this actually did happen, and apparently people actually did die after receiving letters like this. No one knows why, it was probably a coincidence, but still, this is pretty creepy and hard to find research about. ATV. So this should also go pretty low on the list because I couldn't find any information about the story of this building. All I know was that this used to be the former headquarters of Asia Television Company. However, it was eventually closed for unknown reasons. This is located in Ho Chung, and in this piece of stock footage that I use for a couple of my videos, you can actually see it up there in the background. It still sucks I never went there because I've actually heard of Ho Chung, and the marina that encompasses it is very famous and has a lot of rich houses. The number 4. Now, in East Asian cultures, the number 4 is considered unlucky. In fact, in this picture here with a lot of phone numbers, you can see a lot of 4s there, and companies also like to skip the number 4 for floor numbers and use the excuse of it's unlucky. However, higher floor numbers in Hong Kong constitute a higher price, so that's why they'd use it. Villain hitting. Now, this is a pretty funny practice in Hong Kong. It's basically, you go to these old ladies under a bridge, then you hand them a photo of someone you don't like, and they'll beat the crap out of it. Yes, this is an actual thing, and it's pretty funny, and also very popular with tourists. I'd imagine during the protests, I think I know who was on a lot of those photos. Kowloon Walled City. Now, Kowloon Walled City is pretty interesting. It was a community of people that basically built their own city in British Hong Kong because, due to a technicality, it wasn't part of Hong Kong. But eventually, they agreed to hand it back to Britain, and it was demolished right before the handover. Blue taxis. Now, this is a bit of another weird entry, because taxis in Hong Kong are colored in different colors. Some of you may know this. Red for Hong Kong Island, green for the New Territories, and blue for Lantau. This entry might be referring to the fact that since the blue taxis have such little area to cover, because there aren't many roads in Lantau, I would know, the blue taxis are very rare in Hong Kong unless you're in Lantau. Hong Kong 97. Now, this might actually be a pretty well-known entry to some of you. It's considered the worst game ever made in history, and its namesake is the year that Hong Kong was handed over. I don't know much what it's about, but the gameplay footage looks pretty horrendous, although I couldn't get any footage for this video. Lok Ma Chau Lop. Lok Ma Chau Lop, however you pronounce it, is the only unincorporated territory in Hong Kong. It is under the administration of the PRC, however, it was ceded to Hong Kong in 2017 to fix up the borders. New Lantau City Plan. New Lantau City Plan is a planned area in which the Hong Kong government is thinking of dredging up some land near the islands of Pang Chau and relatively close to Discovery Bay. The original plan was to encompass an area and fill in the bay right next to Cheung However, this has since been revitalized. I definitely support this plan now that it won't destroy the beaches that I grew up with, and it can house over 1.1 million people once it's done. This could be the answer to Hong Kong's housing crisis, but it comes at a cost of the local environment. Checkerboard Hill. Checkerboard Hill is a hill in Kai Tak that used to serve as a marker for planes landing at Kai Tak Airport. It's currently in a bit of a state of decay, at the checkerboard part at least, but it's a pretty cool site, and I definitely recommend going there if you're ever in Hong Kong. Cantonese covers of Western music. Now, it's exactly what it sounds like, just Cantonese covers of Western music. I actually like them quite a bit more than the actual original music, especially the Staying Alive one. I don't know why. Kam Shan Monkeys. Now, this is the only place where you can actually see monkeys in Hong Kong. I didn't know this even existed, but they look very cute and I wish I went to see them. Green Island. Now, Green Island is a small island just next to Kennedy Town that houses a detention center. I used to drive by this a lot when I went on ferries, and I always wondered what it was for. They also has a small lighthouse on it, but yeah. It's also just out of view on most of the images you can see of the Hong Kong skyline. It's right in the middle of everything, so I'm surprised it's not more well known. I didn't even know the name of it till just now. PLA Policeman. This is referring to the fact that the People's Liberation Army and the Hong Kong Police work closely with each other, especially during the Hong Kong protests. This could also be referring to the fact that they look a lot like soldiers. But yeah, I don't want to talk about this too much because it brings back some memories, so let's move on. 831. This is referring to a clash that happened during the Hong Kong protests, in which battles broke out in the MTR system in various places with Hong Kong protesters and police. The stations were eventually cleared with heavy damage, and I have no idea what 831 is supposed to mean. Maybe the date or something? I don't know. Milkshake Murderer. This is referring to a case that happened when an American expat killed her husband at a place called Parkview. This is notable because it was the largest criminal case in Hong Kong involving an expat. HMS Tamar. So the HMS Tamar was a British troop ship that was scuttled off Hong Kong, and currently parts of it still remain near the Hong Kong Convention Center in Victoria Harbour, although not much is left, and I don't think you can go diving there because there's so much ships. Tat Sa Mui. Tat Sa Mui is a neighborhood near North Point, and that's all really I can say about it. Wangchukyang. Wangchukyang resides in Maoshen National Park and is one of the oldest neighborhoods in Hong Kong. There aren't really much people living there today, but it is still a cool spot. Wan Chai Markets. Wan Chai Market is a place where you can find a lot of cheap Chinese ripoffs. It's one of those places in Hong Kong where it's basically an alleyway lined with shops, although in this case it's a much bigger area. Still, it's a nice place to explore, especially for tourists that want to get some actual authentic Chinese stuff. It's not like you go with a tour guide and then they give you a little souvenir that says good luck or whatever on it, but in reality, that little souvenir actually says, I hope you die in hell or something, and they can't understand it because it's in Chinese. Sea Ranch. Sea Ranch is a private housing estate near Cha Ma Wan on Lantau Island. It's pretty nice, and it's near where I lived actually in Changsha. Pretty nice place, but I never saw it, surprisingly. It's over a mountain, so when I was driving back and forth, I wouldn't have been able to see it. Waterfall Bay. So in 2016 in Hong Kong, a man slipped and fell to his death near Waterfall Bay in Hong Kong. And this has happened many times. There have also been many strange sightings near the area, so people have labeled it as haunted. I don't know if this is actually true, looks pretty nice, but who knows, could be. Dragon Lodge. So at the peak in Hong Kong, there is this nice little mansion that is now abandoned after the owners let it sit, but it was once a thriving, comfy little four-story mansion. No one knows really why they left it, but they did, and there have also been many strange sightings here. Seems there is actually quite a lot of haunted places in Hong Kong now that I look at it. St. Stephen College. Hours before the British surrendered Hong Kong during the Battle of Hong Kong in which the Japanese invaded, the British soldiers marched into a college and took this as an opportunity to do what they wanted without consequences. So, they murdered and raped most of the women in there, and, well, they didn't stop with the murdering, they murdered almost everyone in there. While it wasn't like the Japanese also did that after they had already taken over Hong Kong, it still is pretty horrifying. Mirror falling TV incident. So in 2022, during a Cantopop concert, actually the first in Hong Kong since COVID restrictions ended, a TV screen above one of the performers fell down and severely injured him, hitting him right on his head. Then, it collapsed further and took out another member. The one member only had his feet hurt, but the member who was hit on the head had his head injured and remained unconscious for months after. From what I've gathered, he's still in the hospital, although this happened 6 months ago, and unfortunately he'll have to be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Tat Tak School. Now, this is referring to a school in the Northwest Territories which has had a long and eventful life. It originally started as just a normal school, then during the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong, it was used to house Japanese soldiers. Then, finally, in around the 60s or so, it was closed down, and has since sat abandoned. It became famous for many ghost rumors over the years, however it is currently being demolished and refurbished for other uses. Illumination Terrace. This is referring to an apartment complex in mid-levels. It's pretty nice, but there's not really much to say about it, other than it's a nice apartment building, I guess. Tu Keng Leng. This is referring to an area in Hong Kong by the same name. After the end of the Chinese Civil War, many Kuomintang soldiers, or people who were fleeing the war, came to Tu Keng Leng. So this place became a very nationalist place. In fact, in this photo you can see the words "Long live President Chang" on the wall after he died. Bank of China Tower bad feng shui. So, apparently what happened was when the Bank of China Tower got built, the sharp edges sliced all the good feng shui. So, when the HSBC building was built, they added some window washers that were pointed to look like guns, shooting off all of the bad feng shui. And apparently this worked. Luck around the building is apparently very good, so who knows, maybe there are mythical dragons running around. 2012 ferry sinking. So in 2012, the MV Llama 4 collided with the MV Sea Smooth. The Llama 4 rapidly sank, and apparently the reason was because they were too distracted looking at the fireworks on Chinese National Day. 39 people died, and the Llama 4 was scrapped. Or I'm pretty sure she might still be existing somewhere because all I could find was this photo. But yeah, the ship never sailed again. Bruce Lee's home. This is of course just referring to Bruce Lee's house, which apparently is currently going to become a Bruce Lee memorial soon, although we already have one of those in Victoria Harbor. But yeah, the place is pretty run down, however it's gonna get a refurbishment soon. Lan Kwai Fong Stampede. Now, this occurred on New Year's Eve of 1993, when, during the New Year's countdown, many people rushed out of the bars and restaurants, and in the end, 20 people died in the ensuing stampede, as well as 100 people injured. Peng Chau Cinema. This is simple. It's a cinema in Peng Chau. However, just like a lot of the abandoned buildings that make no sense on this list, it's haunted as well. It looks pretty creepy, especially the inside. But that's all I can say about it. No way else to drag this out. Pat Sin Ling Fire. In 1993, Pat Sin Lin had a massive fire, which killed 3 people. It ended up being the deadliest fire in Hong Kong history. Pak Fu Lam Cemetery. Now, cemeteries in Hong Kong are pretty different from North American ones. They're giant and built on hills. In fact, I never even knew that I used to drive past this place for a long time until I saw this photo. But, yeah, it's the largest cemetery in Hong Kong. Chung Po Tsai Cave. This is a cave in Chung Chau where the pirate legend Chung Po Tsai would hide a lot of his treasure. I've actually been here, and even if it wasn't a legendary treasure cave, I'd still probably go in it, cause it's pretty cool, open, and is accessible to many people. I'd totally turn it into my little fort if it wasn't a tourist attraction and I lived on Chung Chau. 45 Matsu Wai Road. So, this was a building that collapsed in 2010. The building has since been redeveloped, and the incident resulted in 4 deaths and 9 injuries. Bremer Hill Murders. In 1985, 2 teenagers were killed in British Hong Kong when they were jumped by a couple of gangsters who asked for cash. However, they only had $1 on them, so they decided to have some fun and killed them. Thankfully, they were later found guilty and are still in jail. The case is extremely complex, and I could not do it justice in this video, so I recommend you do your own research for this. Karaoke Fire. Also known as the Bao Lai karaoke arson case, it occurred in 1997 when a karaoke place caught on fire, and it ended up killing 17 people and injuring 30. It is one of the largest cases in Hong Kong's history involving arson. Apple Films advertisement. I couldn't find much on this. I found a video for an advertisement for a company called Apple Films, but I couldn't figure out what it was about because I don't speak either Cantonese or Mandarin or even Taiwanese. So yeah, I don't know what this is about, but it's here. It exists. However, if someone does know what this video is saying, then please leave it down below. I'll pin it. Haunted Kowloon Canton Railway advertisement. So this is referring to this weird commercial for the Kowloon Canton Railway. I don't know what it's about because, of course, once again, I've ignored my Hong Kong patriotic duties and I still do not know Cantonese. But the only interesting thing I can find about this is that the original version had kids from Hong Kong, but this version has kids from the mainland, which, to be fair, considering that this was before the handover of Hong Kong, I wouldn't be surprised. Ouija board disappearance. So this is referring to someone who went missing in 2009. I'll leave the link down in the description just because I want to see if he can somehow be found, and if he is still alive, who knows, maybe someone in Hong Kong can help out. But yeah, I'll leave the link to the police report down below, but there's not really much I can link to a Ouija board from what I can see, but it is a pretty mysterious case. Castle Peak Road. Castle Peak Road is the longest road in Hong Kong and was completed in 1997 by the British as one last major engineering achievement by the British to the people of Hong Kong. Wan Tu Tsin. This is referring to common ghost sightings happening in this area, and there's not really much to say about it. There's a lot of ghost sightings in Hong Kong. Apparently the ghost is said to be headless and wheeling a wooden cart full of headless bodies. That's pretty weird, but also probably not true. I don't see how that's possible. Even for a ghost, I don't see how that is possible. Mount Davis. This is referring to a popular viewing site in Hong Kong and a hiking trail. It's right next to Green Island, which we mentioned earlier, and has a great view looking all the way towards Sunshine Island, Peng Chau, and Lantau. White House. This is referring to a former detention center for the Hong Kong Police Force, the British Hong Kong Police Force, in Victoria Road. However, nowadays, it's a university. Rumsey Station. This is referring to an MTR station that had one of its platforms closed, and this pretty creepy video was taken of it. Honestly, I think I'm probably gonna post this image right here to r/liminal spaces, because, well, it fits the bill perfectly. Sao Mau Ping landslide. This is referring to a lesser-known landslide that happened in 1972, when a portion of a road collapsed and buried a ton of apartment buildings' lower exits. None of them collapsed, but 71 people did die. To be fair though, Hong Kong is very hilly, so I'm not surprised that there's been a couple of landslides here. Sao Mau Ping Cinema. This is referring to a cinema located not far from the landslide I just talked about. It's been closed for over 30 years, and I thought those slanted walls in the photo were part of the structure just decaying and collapsing. But no, those were meant to be there. Currently it's being redeveloped into a film center for Hong Kong movies. Ghosts playing Mahjong. Yeah, I didn't really find much about this, but to compensate for me leaving out a lot of stuff that I couldn't find out about, I just added it here. Really, I can't really find much about this, because once again, the article that's linked is it all in Chinese and there is no translation. But I'm assuming it's a story or a local legend about ghosts playing Mahjong, but all I know is that it happened in the 70s, and it was about headless ghosts playing Mahjong, but some reports have the legend going as far back as the 50s. Cane Road Garden. Yeah, once again, couldn't find much about this, but it's a little park area in Cane Road. There's a lot of these little park areas spread all around Hong Kong that little kids like to go play, and they're usually near government housing. Woody Station. Oh, not another ghost story. So yeah, I actually could find information on this, so I'm gonna say that here now. But basically, there's an urban legend that there's a lost MTR station named Wat Tai Station in Hong Kong that has been closed for decades. I have no idea where this came from or where the rumor came from, but I'm thinking it has something to do with that empty MTR platform. Man Gai Kwai. This is referring to another urban ghost legend, are you kidding me? But it's basically where, back in the 1955 era, some people were camping and then a flash flood killed 20 of them. Then, this resurfaced when a ghost hunting show in Hong Kong, which, oh boy, it's the same newspaper. I'm just gonna guess that this website is all dedicated to Hong Kong ghosts. But yeah, they picked up some paranormal activity near the site, so that's all really. Jars Killer. This is referring to an infamous serial killer in Hong Kong by the name of Lam Kor Wan. He was eventually sentenced where he died in prison and had about 5 victims. Till this day, he's still one of the most famous serial killers in all of Hong Kong, and has been portrayed in many movies ever since then. Bella Vista Villa. This is referring, once again, to a ghost story. Shocker for this tier. But yeah, all I could find was this video that's entirely in Cantonese from some Hong Kong ghost hunters. But other than that, couldn't find anything about it online, don't know why it's haunted, but I guess go check out the video if you're into Cantonese. Choi Hung's Hell's Gate. This is referring to a station in the MTR named Choi Hung, where, basically as they were testing it, there's a ghost story that the crew took a 4-minute trip in 30 minutes and came out the other end looking confused and dazed. Within 2 days, the crew had died. They then used a second train to repeat the test, and the same thing happened. They then investigated it and found it ran through a gate of hell. So, they didn't use the line that ran through the Gate of Hell, and till this day, you can still see an empty platform where they would have used it. I don't really believe in this too much, but it is an interesting story. Bride's Pool. This is referring to a nice park in the north of Hong Kong, where legends say a couple was getting married and the bride fell into the pool and drowned, so they named it after her. It's more than a pool though, has a pretty nice waterfall and is a pretty big pond. So, yeah. Garley Building. This is referring to a fire that happened in 1996, in which a deadly fire in the Garley Building took place, which took 41 lives. In fact, in the tier for this iceberg, you can see the photo that they use is actually of a guy in the Garley Building with fire behind him. It's a pretty creepy photo. But yeah, it was one of the largest fires in Hong Kong's history, and still today the building shows damage from the fire. Windsor House. Windsor House is a shopping mall in Hong Kong, and I've actually been there, and it's pretty tall, pretty impressive, and has a lot of great selection and a lot of stores. This is only on the iceberg because there's a ghost story attached to it, but I couldn't find anything on that, and also, well, I've had too much ghost stories for one tier. Yomate MTR Suicide. Now, I know I just said that I've had too many ghost stories, but this one's actually kind of interesting. Well, first off, of course, it's rumors that the Yamatai station is of course haunted, which I don't believe. But there's also an interesting story where apparently at the station a woman jumped to her death on the tracks, but when they went there to recover the body, there was no body and not even a drop of blood, so the police wrote it off as collective hallucination. Will this be on an episode of Unsolved? No, because that's all that there is on the case. But still, it's a pretty neat ghost story. Ocean Park Missing Cable Car. The cable car is a very iconic part of Ocean Park, and I've personally been through it every single time I went there, even looking at my apartment sometimes. Speaking of which, when it first opened, it looked like this. Terrifying. Anyways, the main story is that once during a landslide, it blocked off the road that led to one of the sections of the amusement park, so they had to use the gondolas 24 hours a day to bring supplies up to feed the animals, and also to get personnel there and stuff. Eventually the road was reopened though. I can't find anything about a missing cable car, but whatever. Tok Soy parent murders. Just before we get into this, I'm gonna say that this part of the iceberg is going to be very, very gruesome, so if you don't like that stuff, please click off. Anyways, but yeah, basically I can't get into the full of this, not because, well, actually, yes, also because I don't want to talk about it, but it's also a very long and complex case that could span multiple videos. Anyways, basically, it was a couple of parents who were murdered by their own son, then cooked and stored in a fridge. Thankfully, though, they pleaded guilty and are now in prison. Namco Terrace. This is a historic building located in Wan Chai. It was used as a fortress during the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong, but was built in 1912 and owned by a wealthy Shanghai businessman. It's currently abandoned, however, is being redeveloped. And I definitely did not only cover this because it is on a place called Ship Street. Tilford cyanide poisoning. This is a case where a man poisoned 5 women with cyanide, and when they found out who it was discovered that he was in the mainland, so he would stand trial in the mainland, which he eventually did. He lost the case and was eventually executed by firing squad. Onting Estate, 4th floor. This is referring to an apartment building in Hong Kong where, in a single room, there have been at least 5 homicides throughout the room's history. For these reasons, it remains the only room in the entire building not occupied, and the fact that it's the 4th floor, and, well, I mentioned that earlier why. So Lao Pun. So Lao Pun is a village in the New Territories that is currently abandoned, and the only building remaining being a Chinese temple. Hello Kitty Murders. Well, when I originally saw this in the iceberg, I thought it was a much more gruesome case, but turns out I've covered worse on this iceberg, so let's get into it. In short, it was a young Chinese woman who unfortunately grew up a very miserable life, being inside of multiple homeless shelters and having a massive drug addiction due to her bad life. And eventually one day she met a man who promised her stability, but the man got frustrated after she continuously stole his money to go buy, well, more drugs. So he unfortunately tortured her for who knows how long. We'll never know because he's dead. But then, after she finally died, he stuffed her skull into a Hello Kitty doll and threw her out. Eventually, the police found the doll and linked the murder back to him, and he was thankfully imprisoned. What happened to the rest of the body, or how it was found, I have no idea. But that's all I can cover. It's a very long case, and there's a lot more to it, but yeah, it's very famous, so you can find a lot of stuff about it online if you're that type of person. Elizabeth House. This is an unsolved mystery that took place in 1984, in which the bodies of two people were found wrapped up in an apartment complex, and they were gruesomely found with blood trickling down through the floor from the other person living below them. But yeah, it's never been found out why they died or who killed them, but it's believed they were involved in a monetary dispute with a Hong Kong gang, which of course is not something you want to be in. Lai Fong Lai King Estate Lost Flat. This is a case where a policeman broke up with his girlfriend in the most delightful way possible, by going down to her house with a knife, killing her and her sister, but then the other escaping, telling the story, and then he was quickly arrested and thrown in prison. It's a lot more complex than that, but the video's getting really long, and I'm trying to rush through it, so sorry, but look it up. I will, of course, link the iceberg down below so you can find out more. Victoria Harbor supervolcano. Way back when, as in Pangaea, there used to be a supervolcano, and it sat where Hong Kong currently is. The only remaining bit of the supervolcano is a small island. However, the island itself has some pretty unique things in it, including this amazing waterfall and hexagon-shaped rocks. However, it's hard to access the island, therefore tourists don't usually go, mostly just riding by in boats to take photos of the hexagon rocks. And that is it, ladies and gents, the Hong Kong iceberg. This took a lot longer than I thought it would, mostly because of other projects as well as school that I had to balance in between making this video. But I hope you found it entertaining and informative, and I sure learned a lot of things about Hong Kong. However, there's a lot of things I had to cut out from this video, because I couldn't find any sources about it that were in English, or it was just so insignificant I couldn't say anything about it. So, if the original creator of this iceberg, which big shout out to, by the way, could please contact me and clear up some stuff, that would be cool, thanks. Also, this video came out on the year anniversary of me leaving Hong Kong. It's been crazy being out of Hong Kong for this long, but my memories of it haven't faded, and of course with this video and others, I will continue to share the amazing memories of Hong Kong. There are some things I definitely have to say about this iceberg, like how some entries don't even have links attached to them, or the links are all in Chinese so English speakers can't read. But also, I feel like the organization is a bit wrong. A lot of the things on the first tier were pretty hard to find information about. However, entries deeper down were actually pretty famous. I get this iceberg's also supposed to be about darkness, and I think putting the Hello Kitty murders, for example, at the top of the iceberg would not be fitting. However, I still do think that some of the entries could be reorganized. I didn't cover a lot of the entries, like I said, because I didn't have any English articles, I couldn't find any info on them, or they were just insignificant. But it was also sometimes mainly just because, well, there were a lot of ghost stories, even the ones that I didn't cover, so I just got sick of them and I didn't really cover as much. But if you want to find more about this, of course I'll link the iceberg down below, and besides, I was at a time crunch for this video, as I'm currently on vacation as this video is airing, spring break. But I want to thank everyone that's made it this far, and I tried to make it as best as I can, even with the limited time. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please check out the original iceberg, and Soigin.